Apart from Native Americans, who were the first to know Wisconsin's natural history, there was one who many argue was Wisconsin's premier naturalist, Increase Allen Lapham, the first to promote the state's natural history well beyond the state's borders. Wiry, quiet, and unassuming, this self-trained knoller possessed an inexhaustible passion to understand and catalog the natural world. Today, Increase Lapham is widely recognized as Wisconsin's most accomplished, pioneering naturalist, working at a time preceding and following statehood, in initiating investigations into the state's botany, geology, topography, geography, ichthyology, meteorology, history, forestry, and archaeology. The Smithsonian Institution published his work on effigy mounds in 1855, the highly acclaimed Antiquities of Wisconsin. I just wanted to show you a picture of him in case this is a picture of Increase Lapham. This portrait of him is hanging at the State Historical Society in Madison. Wisconsinites had never seen anything quite like him, and Increase Lapham left an indelible impression on those who encountered him. One day, while traveling in an open wagon with a group of reporters to inspect the planned route of a southeastern Wisconsin railway line, he asked the driver to stop and stop again, so that he could walk into a field to pick a flower or another plant or collect a stone. One reporter described Lapham's effect this way: "No sooner had we fairly started than little was his mind occupied with the question of the railway. If he secured something rare and new, his face and manner seemed to express the joy of a child in chasing a butterfly. And so we traveled for 30 or 40 miles. The journey was slow but interesting, and the more we saw of his guileless and childlike life, the more profound was our admiration for the character of the man who seemed to rise above the dross of the world and soar constantly in the realms of science." So this is a letter. He arrived in Wisconsin in 1836 from Ohio, and this was a letter that he wrote on October 1st, 1836, to his father. Second letter to his father when he arrived. "I have already made several jaunts through the country, Father. First to the Root River, 25 miles on foot and alone through the woods, 17 miles of it without any house. Saw no Indians, but if I had, I should have felt much more safe than if I had met a gang of white men. They are decidedly the most to be dreaded. Second to the Menominee Falls on horseback with an experienced backwoodsman. Encamped at night on the bank of the river at the falls. This was my first essay in camp duty. Cooked my dinner by hanging a piece of meat on a sharp stick and fastening the end of the stick in the ground before the fire. Slept on the ground under a small cloth tent, which we brought on one of our horses." And then this next letter is to Darius, his brother. One thing about his relationship with Darius, that they had a similar sense of humor. And so Increase's sense of humor really comes out, unlike with any other that he corresponded with. This was written on December 9th, 1837. "Dear brother, I received a few days since on my return from the mineral country your long epistle on the subject of shooting stars, Patsy's journey," Patsy was another brother, "how to get along in the world, how you are drawing a salary of $3,000, how much you are ahead of the other engineers in Ohio, and so on, all of which is very interesting to me. And now it becomes my duty to sit down and write as long a letter in reply. But how shall I do it? What subject shall I select which will be of interest to you? There's the rub. What do you care about our flourishing town? It's all a humbug, so I will say nothing about that. Shall I tell you about the country between here and the Mississippi, which I have just visited for the purpose of studying its features, its productiveness, its mines, its water communications? What are all of those to you? I suppose that an account of my descent into a mine 90 feet deep and extending many hundred feet in various directions at that depth below the surface, or if I tell you how much I was surprised to find ore lying in horizontal beds instead of veins as had been represented, or should I tell you of sleeping in the woods and being awakened by the hooting of an owl instead of the crowing of a cock in the morning? These things, I suppose, you care nothing about. What then shall be the subject? If you care nothing about the country I am in, perhaps you will care something about me. Shall I tell you then what I am doing and how to do it, and how I do it? How I spend my time, how I amuse myself during my few leisure hours? These you can easily imagine, for I spend my time about the same as all other old bachelors. Would you like to hear about my private concerns, how I get along in the world? If I should tell you how often I go a-courtin', how many pretty lasses we have here, and all about our parties and sleigh rides, you would probably think that I was consuming time, pen, ink, and paper foolishly. And you would think, right enough, too. If I should detail the plan proposed to procure the immediate construction of a canal from Milwaukee into the Mineral Point region, this should tell you what steps have already been taken to bring about that object. Or should I tell all that has been done in the way of exploring the route, you would perhaps think it was only a visionary speculating project which would never be carried into effect. In view of all these difficulties, I can only conclude by asking, what shall I write about? Yours affectionately, Increase. So Increase was called to give lectures. He was called upon to give different lectures to church groups and to school groups. And this is an excerpt from a talk he gave to the Unitarian Church in Milwaukee in 1848, February 4th, 1848. And his subject was the extensive prairies that we had in Wisconsin at that time. Our oak openings, as they are called, afford much scenery of extreme beauty. Thousands of dollars have been expended in European countries to adorn and beautify the estates of the noble and wealthy classes without producing anything more than a slight approximation towards the beauty and loveliness of our oak openings. I have spoken of the beauty of the prairies, but it must not be forgotten that although they are beautiful and highly attractive at first sight, they are not, after all, exactly the places for the new settler to fix upon for his future home, unless he can find, what is rarely to be found, a tract of land half covered with timber and half prairie. The bleak winds of winter roam over these proud prairies with as much freedom as upon old ocean itself, and they are here without the modifying influence of water. They are therefore much dreaded by the luckless persons who are compelled to encounter them. Even in summer, the constant stream of air coming in the same direction, unchecked by a single tree, is very inconvenient to persons passing over the prairies. I have known persons to have their cheeks chafed and become sore by the fluttering of their shirt collars while traveling on the prairies. This was, of course, in the prosperous days of shirt collars, and before they assumed their present downward tendency. The prairie roads, so fine in summer, are an abomination in winter. A strong wind blowing constantly in one's face, when the thermometer is anywhere in the neighborhood of zero, is not to be supported by many people, but must often be encountered on the prairies. Many persons have lost their lives in this encounter. It is found to be especially dangerous on those roads which most abound in licensed taverns. So that gives you a sense of what travel on the prairies must have been like and how extensive and broad they were.
Shoulder up your gun and whistle up your dog.
Shoulder up your gun and whistle up your dog, out to the woods for to catch a groundhog. Oh, groundhog. Ate our carrots, peppers, and peas. Ate our carrots, peppers, and peas. Chopped our beans off to their knees. Oh, groundhog. Here comes Sally with a 10-foot pole. Here comes Sally with a 10-foot pole. Rout that whistle pig out of his hole. Oh, groundhog. I dug down, but I didn't dig deep. I dug down, but I didn't dig deep. Found that whistle pig fast asleep. Oh, groundhog. Here comes Sally with a whistle and a grin. Here comes Sally with a whistle and a grin. Groundhog grease all over her chin. Oh, groundhog. Children screamed and the children cried. The children screamed and the children cried, but they loved their whistle pig stewed and fried. Oh, groundhog. Eat up meat and tan hide. Eat up the meat and tan the hide. Make the best bootstrings ever was tied. Oh, groundhog. Shoulder up your gun and whistle up your dog. Shoulder up your gun and whistle up your dog. Out to the woods for to catch a groundhog. Oh, groundhog.